Just a quick disclosure to share in conjunction with this podcast. Each of us are speaking to our personal experiences and do not consider ourselves experts and cannot offer medical, therapy, financial, or legal advice. We represent a wide range of experience on the autism spectrum and will always honor each perspective that is brought to our discussions. Our experiences, opinions, and perspectives are all unique and different and will be celebrated. Thank you so much for listening and connecting with us. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Navigating Adult Autism. We are a bunch of moms with a lot of perspectives, opinions, and experience. My name is Mary. I am here tonight with Dawn, Heather, Cynthia, and Elizabeth and Tara. We are missing Kara tonight, but our topic is guardianship, and we're just going to touch on our personal stories of those who have guardianship and those who have not. And then Elizabeth, our wonderful family advocate, will fill us in on some important details about guardianship. And then at a later date, we are going to have an attorney on here on our podcast that will go into greater detail about guardianship and power of attorney and other items. So we're just going to kick it off and start talking about it. Who would like to start tonight? Did I hear you, Heather?
Oh, I didn't know I volunteered.
Yeah,
okay.
I thought I'd volunteer for you.
Okay. So this is Heather.
And you have Zachary.
And I have Zachary. And he's 22. We did get full guardianship for him as soon as he turned 18. I've got the paperwork in front of me. It looks like the court date was like 3 or 4 days after his birthday. Anyway, so this was a fairly easy decision, I guess. Zachary's on the profound end of autism, the autism spectrum, and can't make any decisions for himself or, live independently or anything like that. So, but I can tell you how that kind of worked for us because I do get lots of questions from people.
Do you? Okay.
So what happened for us is I was nervous about it probably 2 years before he turned 18. The nerves and the worry started at 16. So what I ended up doing was contacting a lawyer at that point, just so I could understand how the process was going to work. So I would recommend people do that instead of worrying and losing sleep. And that lawyer said, hey, Heather, you got to come back 3 to 4 months before his birthday. That you can't do anything before then. And so we did that. There was a lot of paperwork. Let's see. Zachary got a guardian ad litem assigned to him. Which is obviously the case because Michael and I were the petitioners to be his co-guardians.
And a guardian ad litem is?
It's basically a lawyer for Zachary. Yeah. And that lawyer is very nice and did do a home visit. And he checked to see that Zachary's, place and where his room was and kind of, just the situation at home. He did do that. So we had a home visit, which I know sometimes I've heard parents be nervous about all that stuff, but it's just...
Did you guys have a fee to that lawyer? You paid that lawyer?
Yeah.
I know we did.
Yes, we had a fee. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what we paid, but I will say that it was fairly minimal.
Yeah.
I think. So, but he came to visit and then we did a bunch of paperwork. We had...
Was one home visit required?
Just one home visit from Zachary's lawyer.
Okay.
And then he was also served papers. I think there might be an option not to be served, but in this case, I'm just going with what happened to us. So on Easter Sunday evening, we had 2 sheriff deputies come to the house. Okay. And they served Zachary papers. Of course, Zachary was just intrigued by the 2 gentlemen in uniform. And so... just like we do, because I'm a scrapbooker, I was like, do you mind to take a picture with Zachary?
Okay, that's cute.
So I think I remember seeing that on Facebook.
So Zachary took a picture with the 2 sheriff people, and they were very kind. And they said, you know what? No one's ever asked to take our picture.
When we're serving papers.
I was like, this is kind of a different situation. So anyway, and then we had a court date that was set, obviously. It was family court, so no one else was in the courtroom with us, which I think that concept, at least for us, makes people nervous. Like, you're not in front of a bunch of strangers that you don't know. And then I had to testify. which can be, all of this is emotional. I'm saying it with little giggles because it's been, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and you've survived. Once you've survived it, you can,
look back
Absolutely.
and laugh,
yes. But at that point, we kind of shut everything down, even therapies, because I was like, this is all I can handle mentally, is just to get through this situation, because it does feel like that final kind of point where you're thinking it. Not that life's over at all, but Elizabeth, you might have some thoughts on that.
And it was like 3 or 4 days under the, somebody else.
Yeah.
I was like, well, what if something happens during that 3 or
Right.
4 days? Or what
Yes.
if they decide we're not fit and they're going to, and just everything you can think of. And of course, 3 or 4 days pass. And, because there was a short period of time where they turn 18 before the court ruling that he is under that guardian ad litem.
Yes.
And that was my biggest fear. And it was very unfounded. But that's what we do to ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird because it's like, and people, what I thought was interesting was, we didn't know the details of how it all went down, but anyone that just around us, that family even, didn't understand like kind of why you have to do it. And it's like, well, because when your child is 18, that's it, folks. You can't really tell them what to do.
That's right.
You might think you can tell them what to do, but legally you can't tell. Like you lose your rights to tell your kids anything once they're 18.
Well, and
unless you have guardianship.
That's enforceable by law.
Yes.
I mean, I still boss my kids around a little bit.
Yes. But I mean, you can't legally make decisions for it. Like Zachary would be a ward of the state if Michael and I were not his guardians. And I think that's what Elizabeth's talking about. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And also, their doctors aren't going to talk to you.
Right.
Anything that
you can't make healthcare decisions.
You can't make healthcare decisions. You can't, do their banking. You can't do any of that stuff unless maybe the banking if you set up a joint account, but you can't go up and open an account on their name. You can't make, and nobody with any financial or legal items, terms, anything, they're not going to talk to you. Right. Unless you can.
No, I was worried about him getting sick, or what if he has to go to the hospital or in this little bit of time, right? Because it couldn't be the day before his birthday. And that's per county, I think. In our county, it had to be.
Yeah. And I think
they had to be 18 before they would
petition.
Make the date.
Yeah. So,
but I do, this is kind of not really funny, but I do keep the paperwork, and I keep a copy in my purse at all times, just in case, because with an adult, I just always want to have proof that you can talk to me, and you can. I have heard kind of some horror stories where maybe they didn't have the paperwork and people.
Well, that's a good tip.
Yeah, so I keep that just in case, do you need this on file? Do you need to scan this into your system? Anyway, but court day, like I say, it was emotional. There were tears. There were all sorts of things. But I will say that the judge and the recorder and both lawyers were extremely, extremely lovely to us. And we all took pictures afterwards. And and so the thing I will say about this, because I think it's a fairly depressing thing generally to have to go through. So I had a mom that had done it previously to me. I think she had a son that was late 20s at this point when I met her. And she just gave me some great advice, which I like to share with everyone.
Sure.
But she's like, if you got to do it, just celebrate. And she said, just celebrate it. She said, we literally had a party. And I thought, we're going to have a party. So we got a cake. It was a small party. We did, we really didn't feel like inviting a bunch of people over. So it was just me and Michael and Zachary, but we had our own little party. We had a cake with, it was like a guardian angel kind of a cake. Oh. And we had a gavel put on the top of it.
I love that.
And the person that made it said, I've never made a cake with a gavel. And I'm like, well,
and angel wings.
We aren't your typical cake orders. So anyway, so that's what we did. We just kind of celebrated the moment. And that picture, we took a picture with the cake, the three of us, and that's framed in the living room. I won't ever take that down. Oh. So, I mean, it's really as hard as it was, and you hope when they're young that this is no one wants to do this, right? And they don't want to think about having to do it. But I guess we just kind of thought it's a gift. We just looked at it as a gift. It's a gift that we are here and healthy enough to continue to help him as an adult, because there lots of things could go wrong, and this maybe couldn't work out. So we're just happy that it was able to work out, and everybody was so nice. So,
Wow. That's a good story.
Yeah.
I do have a question. When you went to court and you had to testify,
Yeah.
so then what did you testify to?
I had to testify to like his capacity to make decisions and things like that. And I think that's the hardest part because you're saying your kid can't do certain things right in front of him.
Yeah.
He was and he had to sit on the opposite side with his lawyer. He could not sit with us.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it was fine. It was a little courtroom. But he did have to sit with his lawyer. And Michael definitely did not want to testify. So he's like, you are definitely doing that part. And so they did prepare me with
husband.
Yeah.
Yes, husbands are another topic later.
We love Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Yes.
They prepped me with the questions though. So but hearing them in the moment, you're still going to cry, folks.
Of course.
You're just going to have to do it and just suffer through it. But it was quick. They didn't like prolong it. I was probably talking for 5 or 6 minutes or something like that. So.
Are you the only one who had to? I mean,
Only
did you
one
have to have
person
like
had to-
letters from doctors?
Oh, well,
and
the documentation is, the word I would use is intrusive and also depressing. But you have to have all that. Tons of documentation going into it before you could even petition for the court date and all that stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
So the paperwork is interesting, and a lawyer would help you, guide you through that, just like a service coordinator guided us through different paperwork that we've had to do before. But definitely without a professional, it would be a nightmare, I would say.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know ours was a little bit different because we were during COVID, so
my
we
goodness.
had a virtual court date.
Oh my.
So it was really kind of different.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of, I don't know. It was just different. Seemed less, intrusive. It was, just everybody had been on a million webinars and all that. So but it was there was still a lot of emotion there. And it's interesting how you said, talking about some of those reasons. I know just I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was Social Security or Medicaid that called, and like, well, you have his papers. Well, I don't have his papers. I'm like, yeah, you've got the papers. I've talked to people for the last couple of years. And so he says, well, is he there? And I'm like, yes, he is. And he said, well, I need to get verbal confirmation. I said, let's go for it. So I walk into his bedroom and I kind of wake him up, and I'm like, Nathan, can mom talk to this person? And I'm like nodding my head. Mm-hmm. And of course he's nodding his head backwards. And I'm like, say yes. And he goes, say yes.
Oh, that's great.
And I said, will that do? And she said, that'll do.
Oh, gosh.
But yeah, it was very interesting. We did have that journey with Nathan and making that, but it was really interesting because leading up to making that decision for him and to be his guardian, I've been really a big part of bringing the supported decision making kind of the movement that hit Springfield and Missouri. Jonathan Martinez, Elizabeth Moran. Jonathan Martinez, if you don't know, look up his case on Jenny Hatch. Really good. It's about keeping as many rights as possible rather than going to full guardianship. So I'm in the midst of all this that's going on. I'm so excited going to, being part of the supported decision-making consortium and going to all these talks. And I was so excited. And then I realized, I'm like, yeah, they're not talking about Nathan. So I went up to Jonathan Martinez once and I said, is there any way that he could retain any of his rights and, that I wouldn't have to be his guardian? And he said, and I told him about Nathan, he said, there's guardianship for a reason. And he says, no, your son needs a guardian. He says, but what I can tell you is be the best guardian you can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, I think that helped me, some of that emotion that you had to go through in your family on your own. In that moment, I got all that. I got what I needed to hear was, there's a reason for guardianship. And just be the best one you can. Right. You know him. You're going to make the right choices on his behalf. So do that. And then when it came time for my youngest, Chase, turned 18 this summer, and thought and decided that we were not going to take guardianship for him, that he could make those decisions. And a big part of that decision was that he listens to his parents. He doesn't have reckless behavior. He's at a point where, I don't really have to worry about friends taking advantage of him and squatting in his home and taking his Social Security check. He still listens to everything, that we say. He's got some medical needs, but he listens and takes that guidance. So if he'd fought us on some of that, maybe not. If we got to every Sunday and he said, yeah, I'm not going to take my shot for my Crohn's disease, maybe we'd have made a different decision. But he reminds me, get the timer set, and he reminds me every Sunday, hey, it's my shot day. Which leg? He can't ever remember which leg. So it was different for both of them. And then for my oldest, Nicole, it wasn't even a consideration. That wasn't something that came into play. But part of that whole movement of that supported decision making, I really liked one of the stories that Jonathan spoke about. He said, we all have our group. So supported, that means we reach out to others. We have those group of people that help us. And he said, if I were to, I forget what part of a car, he was getting his car fixed. He said, I rely on those people. I rely on people to help me with those decisions because I don't know enough about cars. That's part of supported decision making. If you don't know enough about something, you study it out, you find those around you that know more. And the biggest thing that really was part of that movement was the dignity of failure. Sometimes we as parents are looking at protecting, and we don't want our kids to go through something. And that was really a big part of supported decision making, is allowing them to fail. Now we want to protect, and sometimes there might be somebody who is their what is it, their own best enemy, worst enemy, own worst enemy, that's going to need maybe financial guardianship. And I know we're going to kind of hit on that there's not just full guardianship, that there's different types.
Yes. Do you know the different types? Do you have them? Are we going to hit on that later with the attorney?
Well, I think when we're just talking guardianship, right, you can do that full guardianship. What is that called? Plenary, right? Plenary or full guardianship, and then limited guardianship. And that can be going before the court and deciding what rights need to be, taken away, for lack of a better word, but have that be. So whether it's medical or financial, it could be, placement, decisions made on placement. And so there's those partial guardianships that just, covering those areas where an individual may need that extra support.
Right. So 2 of our parents here have full guardianship. The rest of us do not have guardianship, correct? Right. So I have medical power of attorney. I think that's all we have. But we're actually going through Heather and I share the same attorney, actually. We're kind of going through our updated trust and will and ironing more things out, because that's another thing. When we'll have the attorney later, things change, people change. Right. Situations change. Some people that we need to put in our trust and our will, the attorney recommended, someone younger. That would be there. So there's a lot of facets, but we do have medical power of attorney. And real quick, we kind of learned the hard way when, and this is Mary, by the way, and my son is 31. But when he was in his early 20s, him and I were at a restaurant, Wingstop to be exact, and it had been a really busy day. There's a lot of things going on at home, and apparently my son got a little dehydrated and really didn't eat much, which is not, the norm for him. But when we got our order, all of a sudden he passed out and his face kind of went right into his wings. And I'm like, saying his name over and over. And, apparently the nurse that's in his doctor's office happened to be there with her family. Talk about
lucky. Yeah.
It happens a lot where people are there.
You
for
just
us.
told us the story a couple weeks ago, and you
Yes.
had a Greene County
Yes.
sheriff.
Yes, I know. And there's the nurse, and she's sitting there, and
You
she
are.
runs over. I didn't know she was there at the time, I must say. She
Yeah.
ran over, and I was like, what are you? Because where I'm sitting now, I know you can't see me, but I was sitting here, and my son was there. And she ran over, and, and she was helping him and taking his pulse. And he would not wake up for a while. I thought he was seizing. And actually, she did too. And she still thinks that it was more than a faint. But so she called 911, said call 911, da, da, da. And so I'm kind of freaking out a little bit. And finally he comes to, and right this time the fire truck is here and everything. And he wakes up very angry and belligerent, and which, I've heard after a seizure, they can be like that. To this day, we don't know. He didn't have any seizure activity in the ER. However, when they took him out, they were taking him out. I was giving him his name, all the pertinent information. They're putting him on the stretcher, and they're asking him his name and how old he is. So he was over 18. He was like, get me out of here. I'm not going. He's fighting, get me off this stretcher, undo that, arguing. And so the fireman comes over and he says, bad news, Mom. He's over 18. He doesn't have to go. We're going to get him out of the stretcher. My son is on the stretcher, and I say, no, you're going. I'm trying to talk to him nicely that, no, you need to go to the ER. We need to find out I'm fine. And so they're getting ready to take him off. Listen, I went right up to his face and his ear, and I said, listen, buddy, you're going to the freaking ER right now, and I'm going to call your dad. I did the whole, I'm calling your dad, and you're going
to the hospital so we can save your life,
Yes.
or I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, pretty much, Don. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was trying to. Thank you.
No.
That's what happened. So, fine. I will go. So he's going in, and I'm in the parking lot. So they're taking him away, and it's I'm going to Mercy. Okay, I'm following you in the car. He didn't care. As they're putting him in the ambulance that's here by now, he decides to flip me off as he's going into the ambulance. He's never flipped me off in his life. I didn't even know that he knew how to flip anybody off. That's never happened before. And I'm in the parking lot, and I'm like, okay, like what just happened? What is happening?
Just keeping it fun.
And there's never a dull moment. And so, anyway, the end of that story is my husband and I got medical power of attorney, excuse me. And that was just a simple little incident. Who knows if he would have.
And did that
Not-
require court or anything? Like, what does that part
The
require?
attorney.
Just to know.
Yeah, and we were kind of going to do our will and everything anyway. And that required us going to the attorney, and it was a form. And we signed it. She filed it. And I'm not good, Heather. I don't have it with me all the time. But in fact, I'm not sure I know where it is. I think it's in a drawer somewhere. But I have to update it anyway. But That's what we have now, because that was a lesson learned. Because if I'm not with him, wonder if he really was injured and he refused to go to the doctor. But he can revoke it at any time, like you said, Elizabeth.
Yes.
Oh, is that what you're going to say, Dawn? Yes.
I was gonna ask
And the
that
doctor
question.
told me that too. He said, hey, Mary, if he says, I don't want this anymore. I'm like, okay, I get it. And we still talk to him about it. And he's pretty good about it. So that's all we have right now for him. Anybody else, Cynthia and Dawn, you do not have guardianship. Do you have any type of power of attorney?
Well, I have created powers of attorney, but before I get to that,
Creative power
you
of
say
attorney?
creative?
I have created.
Okay. I'm like,
Great.
that's a new one.
I pull it out of the hat. No. Well, for a number of years, I worked for a family law attorney. I did the clerical, so the typing. And so he worked in family court. He did guardianship. So I was very familiar with the forms. So I had that background information. Then I guess it was the UMKC's Institute for Human Development did a seminar, I think 2015. So, right before JR was going to turn 18. And I went to the seminar to learn. And so they were talking about the alternatives to guardianship, and this little checklist that they had. And does he have the ability to express his wants, his needs, and that? And it's a nice little checklist. And
Yes,
maybe
there was
we
a
can
checklist,
we
yes.
can link it, just to help you think through everything. Daily life and employment, healthy living, medical, and all this. And JR's position on the spectrum, he didn't I'm going to say he didn't earn his high school diploma in the same way that his neurotypical sister earned her diploma. So there's, I would say, cognitive gaps there. But I can leave him at home for long stretches of time. I know he knows how to feed himself. He's not going to burn the house down. I have no fears of that any more than I leaving a pan on the stove, to cause a fire. So,
is this something you and your husband have discussed?
Well, sadly, no, we haven't had family sit-down discussions. I think so many decisions, unfortunately, that we've made regarding JR, it's come down to money. But on this one, I felt like we could take the gamble. And something else that I did to research was I interviewed a couple of moms who were ahead of me. And one had taken guardianship. And if I had to, it seemed like her son was higher functioning than mine. But she didn't take guardianship. And she also got some throwback from the disability community because she did that. But as she explained it, and Elizabeth, I think, has already hit on it, it's whether or not the child is mature enough to take advice, not the child, the young adult, I'm sorry. If the young adult can take advice, if they have a good inkling of, is this good advice? So I tell JR every once in a while when I'm bossing him around, I really think this is good advice. I don't always give you good advice, but think about this. This, I'm telling you, son, this is good advice. You need to do this. He will accept help. There's some grumbling and complaining sometimes to get compliance, but if it's good advice, if it's important, I'm 95% certain that he's going to do that. Now, last year, our internet service provider is not very good. JR called another internet service provider, paid for the installation with his own money, his own debit card, scheduled it, and it was supposed to happen like on a Sunday. And so he made the call on Sunday. Well, it doesn't matter. There was a 5-day gap or so before they were to come to install. And so finally he came to me and he goes, I have to tell you something, you're not going to like it. So he knew that. That's smart. So he told me what it was. And it's like, this is good advice. That's a bad idea, JR. You need to call, cancel, get your money back. And it happened. They listened to me because he's 18. He can enter into his own contracts legally, right? Mm-hmm. He's in our house, still living. He doesn't own the house. He doesn't pay. We're working on the rent end of things, but we got that contract broken. He got his money back. So then we have an opportunity to go fiber optics, and told JR, okay, this bill's going to be yours. You're paying for this. And I decided I'm going to write a power of attorney. The name of the contract, I put it in. This is a power of attorney. JR is going to be responsible for the bill, but he cannot cancel this contract or anything along that line. You must talk to us. And I work at a CPA firm, and there's several notaries. So I took my little created power of attorney, and we had it notarized. Make it official, right? You pay $2 and sign in front of a notary. And, I scanned it and sent it off to the internet providers. So if they honor this power of attorney, they're going to talk to us without any hassle.
Are you waiting a time frame? Like, I know with my husband and I decided to wait till he was 30 to make a decision. Like, let's just give it till he's 30 to see if we need to take full guardianship. Well, our son will be 32 in April, but we haven't done anything yet. There's no rush, really, but do you have a time frame in mind? Because I know our son is, he lives on his own and he's making great decisions. He still takes advice, but I have medical power of attorney, like I said, but there's still issues that maybe I should,
Yeah.
So we're still weighing that option right now.
And even in that case, don't you think there's neurotypical young adults that, they make
Correct.
bad decisions
Yes.
all the time. So, I mean, I don't know that that's like the black and white.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I
I
do.
think it depends. Because, I mean, to me, like, Zachary, we don't need to have full guardianship if we're talking about just regular learning, failing, learning, all that stuff. If he was able to do that, we wouldn't even have considered it. We might have to think about something more specific, like, is there an issue like handling finances, or is there an issue? Do you know what I'm saying? But the rest of it, some of that's just normal, typical
It is. You're right.
struggling through. Like, I didn't make every good choice
I was just going to say I needed someone to make some financial decisions for me. That's why I married Jason.
also I did not always take my parents' advice.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure it was all fabulous. But I didn't always listen.
Right.
So anyway.
But I
yeah.
think as parents, we probably all have that in our back of our head,
Yeah.
right? Thinking,
Right. Because
Right.
how is this going to turn out? And should I
Yes.
take
Right.
guardianship? Because you mentioned the letter, Elizabeth, that, I think when my son was getting ready to graduate, it was stuck in there with his paperwork about guardianship, about
Yes.
is this an option for you and how to explore it. So all of us with kids with a disability, we get that letter in some paperwork at some point after high school, and it's in there. And we read about it and we should talk about it, I guess. But we're still waiting. It's not.
because there is some vulnerability there that might not be, and especially if for those that do receive a disability check,
Right.
there are people
too.
that know
Yeah.
how to work it. They know how to go after that individual and who's maybe lonely, doesn't understand what friendship, certain boundaries of friendship. You don't hand that over to a friend
Right.
because they're your friends, So yeah, so it's so individualized, and just like with So I have 3 in there at 3 different places. Yeah, there might be a time where Chase, we might look into the financial piece, or we might have to look into the medical guardianship,
Right.
because if he starts to refuse his treatments, then that
Right.
could be an issue. I mean, that becomes life threatening for him.
Right.
I think if we structure it so that we, as we age, that our young adult has a support group, or in my case, JR is going to have his younger sister. And hopefully, Zara will be giving him good advice and be a protector, because I think JR is always going to need some guidance.
Yes.
Again, way more so than my daughter Zara,
Right.
So I acknowledge the need for guidance, and I acknowledge my mortality. So structuring a team, well, right now it's a team of 1, but hopefully finding, other people to come and support JR so that he knows that he has people to go to ask questions. And man, even for JR, asking questions is tough.
They don't always know the questions to ask.
Yeah.
So that's that whole concept of supported decision making, is making those teams, making those connections, knowing who to ask. That if they're going to make one of those crazy decisions that we all make, I'm gonna, my daughter was trying to figure out, the battery went out on her car, and she needed to get a new battery, and she didn't want to pay the money, and all a lot of things going on, and she's like, well, I watched on YouTube where I can put a battery in the car myself.
Oh.
I said, let's have you call your grandpa and see what he thinks. And so she's like, yeah. And he said, well, days old, and the cars I used to drive, not a problem. He said, but these cars these days, you need to take it. And so that was her part of her team. I didn't really have the answers to that. All I could see was her putting it on wrong and shocking herself, but then I referred her to somebody else on her team. So I know Eric's building his own team.
Yeah, he is.
He's got quite a little team.
Reproduction.
Yes. And we never seeked any kind of guardianship. And one of the reasons was financial. And then his neurologist always talked to him about his seizures and about him being compliant on medication. And we always felt like we thought he would do it.
Yeah.
And so he has. And when he did start talking about guardianship, when that time came around, the first thing Eric said was, do not want any part of guardianship because I want to vote.
Oh,
That's exactly why I didn't do it for Zion.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, my son voiced the same thing.
so
That's funny.
well, Eric was always involved in politics,
yes,
right?
he was.
Heavily. So,
Yeah.
I can see, though, that if Zion moved out and wasn't taking his medication, I can see maybe that happening. But once I realized I wasn't on my Mercy, I couldn't see any of his records anymore. We just went in and filled out paperwork with the doctor's office that I could get back on my Mercy and see his records. And he made sure he signed paperwork that he could share information with me. And he is pretty compliant. So compliant with sharing information with me as long as he's on. Okay, so I can see how if he wasn't taking his medication, I would probably ask for that.
Right.
Yeah, for medical for medical guardianship. Yeah, and I'm getting ready to update all that right now, so I'm curious to see what the new forms have changed, or I don't know. But Elizabeth, do you have anything else to add to that?
Well, I'm going to put some of these, organizations that teach a lot about this on our blog, but I did want to just throw out some websites too.
Absolutely.
So, moadvocacy.org. So that's going to be Missouri based. And there's, moguardianship.com. And that's going to have a lot of those tools and those toolkits, the stoplight tool, looking at those checklists, to kind of help you go through that. And then there's, supported decisionmaking.org. And future planning, there's a lot of things on future planning.
Oh, okay.
So the National Arc has those. So, whether you don't take guardianship and you're really looking at, wanting to create a life plan, you've got, you used to have an IEP, you might have an individual support plan, that ISP, but what about a life plan? How can you help those who come after you to know, your wishes and your hopes and how to work with things. So that I'm going to go ahead and throw those out.
How to interpret the young adult, because we know their behavioral tendencies and may know what they mean, and somebody who comes in cold doesn't.
Right.
And I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. And so just put those. I'll put those out there and take a look on our blog. And I'm thinking too now with full guardianship, there was a big movement to make keeping the right to vote, that it was an option with full guard. But I am not 100%, but if we've got our lawyer, let's try to get that answer.
I just want piece of advice, which I didn't take myself, but legal aid will help if you meet the financial requirements. Legal aid can help cover the costs of the filings and that. So you have to apply. And another thing in finding an attorney, especially for guardianship, because it's a non-contested issue for the most part. And so I have heard one horror story where a parent went in a guardianship matter and the bill was something like $10,000 or whatever, just horrible. Meet with the attorney. Ask them, this is a non-contested issue. Can we do flat fee billing so that I know exactly what it's going to cost? And I think asking for a flat fee billing will eliminate that, because attorneys usually bill by the hour. And the parent with the horror story, she asked, well, give me a billing, give me an itemized statement. And they did. And so, when it's, 0.5 hours spent on a telephone call, or
8 hours researching, can they retain the right to vote? Maybe.
Exactly. Exactly. And so flat fee billing, I think, is a good piece of advice.
Great.
That is good advice. Good advice. Okay. I think we're going to wrap it up on guardianship. That was a good, important episode. If any more questions or concerns, feel free to email us. And then, like Elizabeth said, everything will be on our blog concerning guardianship. And if something wasn't clear or you have questions about guardianship, just like I said before, email us and see if we can answer them. And then, Tara, where can everybody find us?
Okay, so Elizabeth made some really cool blogs too. So make sure you check those out at navigatingadultautism.com. That's our website. And you can listen to the podcast on the website, on Apple, or Spotify. And then we are on Facebook and Instagram under Navigating Adult Autism. I think it's podcast on Instagram and Navigating Adult Autism on Facebook. Our email address is moms@navigatingadultautism.com.
Okay, excellent.
And she did it with
Very
notes.
good.
I know. I did have to look at the ceiling so I could remember it all. It doesn't help that we only meet like once a month or once every 2 weeks, and I have to remember how to run the soundboard and all of our websites at the same time.
Okay, you're doing a great
Well
job.
done.
Very good. You're doing a great job.
Applause.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Kara, we
Thanks.
miss you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Talk to you
you.
soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.